All right, so today we're going to work on lesson 4, comparing and ordering decimals. So our objectives today is we want to be able to use place value strategies, compare decimals to the thousands, and we also want to understand the place value system and be able to use that for comparing the decimals. So we're going to start off with identifying the place value, the underlying digit, each number. So as I look at the first one, you can see the underline here, and I always like to start at the decimal. And there is no ones. When you go to the right of the decimal, you start with the tenths and then the hundredths. And in this case, the 9 is in the tenths place. If we look at this one here, again, I notice the decimal. And then I say tenths, and the 3 is in the hundredths. So that value would be 3 hundredths in that place value. Here, again, I look. There's the decimal, so tenths, hundredths, and the 9 is in the hundredths place, so it'd be 9 hundredths. This one's a little bit different, so you got to pay closer attention. I see the decimal, and then I know it's tenths, hundredths, and then thousandths. So that would be a value of 2 thousandths, not 2,000, but 2 thousandths. And then our level 3 ones here. This one's a little trickier. First thing I do, since I'm focusing on the decimal place value, I find the decimal. I look to the right of it, and I see the zeros in the tenths place, so that would just be 0 tenths, or it has no value in that place. Okay, and then again, I see this large number. I ignore the commas. I go straight to the decimal, and to the right of the decimal, the 5 is in the tenths place, and it is worth 5 tenths. So again, it doesn't matter about the commas. It only matters where the decimal is when you're talking about decimal place value to the right. All right, so which is greater, 34 hundredths or 248 thousandths? You may use a grid or expanded form to help you decide. Be ready to explain how you know. So take a minute and think about how would you know which is greater? So if I write them down here, I like to just kind of line them up. So I have 34 hundredths and then 248 thousandths. So you could use a grid and color it in to compare these. You could do a lot of different things. First thing I like to do is if there's an open spot here in the thousandths place and there's not here, I like to add a 0. And I can look at this and I can see that 340 thousandths is going to be greater than 248 thousandths. Another strategy I could use is I look in the tenths place and I see the 3 is greater than the 2. So automatically I know that the 34 hundredths is going to be greater than 248 thousandths. If they were the same numbers, I would just go and compare the next digit. So here's a few strategies that you could have used as well. You can see here when you shade them in that 34 hundredths is going to be greater than the 248 thousandths, right? Because it covers more of the grid. So you can see here we have 1 row of 100, 2 rows of 100, 3 rows of 100, and then we have 34 when we add those 40 in this section. Over here, I have 1 row of 200, 2 rows, and then I have 40, and then I have 48, okay? And so that's the difference. It's kind of hard to see here on this display, but 34 hundredths is greater than 248 thousandths. I could also represent both numbers in expanded form, so I could say 34 hundredths. I could write it out that way. 248 thousandths, I could write it out like this. And since 34 hundredths has 3 tenths and 248 has only 2 tenths, 34 hundredths is greater than 248 thousandths. Now, how I would represent that, and this is often a mistake that we make in 5th grade, as we know which one is greater, but we always forget which symbol to use. So remember, the greater than symbol means greater than, and the less than symbol means which are used to record comparison. So I read from left to right, so I'd say 34 hundredths is greater than 248 thousandths. to decide which number is greater, we have to compare the numbers. So comparing decimals is an important skill since many real-world measurements and statistics such as race results, the price of gasoline, or the baseball batting averages are often expressed as decimals. So what digits should we write in the thousands place for 34? So we can see there we have an 8 in the thousands place. So here I would just write a 0 because a 0 doesn't have any value, but it helps us compare the numbers a little bit easier and see that 34 hundredths is the same thing as 340 thousandths. So I think it makes it a little easier when we compare those numbers by having them same. Okay, so when using a place value chart to compare numbers, it's important to start with the leftmost digit and work digit by digit to the right, just like this. We compare them and we can see that 3 is greater than 2. The reason is because a digit in each place is worth 10 times as much would be in the place to its right, so its digits farther to the left have a bigger effect on the value of a number. So as you move to the right, what do you notice about the digit in each place? Okay, hopefully you notice they get smaller as you go to the right as far as the values here. So you have tenths, then you have hundredths, and then thousands, right? And we started at the ones. So every time you move one place to the right, you're getting 1/10 as much. Which is greater, 3/10 or 2/10? So which is greater in this situation then? We know that 3/10 is greater than 2/10, so we know that 34 tenths is greater than 248 thousandths. Does it matter that 248 thousandths has a larger digit in the thousands place than 34 hundredths? Why or why not? So take a minute, think about that. And remember, we always want to compare the first digits that show up when we're reading it from left to right. So that might matter if they both have a 2 in the tenths place, they both had a 2 in the tenths place, if they both have a 4 in the hundredths place, then it would matter in the thousands place which one was greater. But because the 3 is greater than the 2 in the tenths, it does not matter in that case. You already showed that 34 hundredths has one more tenth than 234 thousandths when you represent the numbers in expanded form. Using a place value chart also makes that difference clear by showing a 3 in the tenths column for the 34 hundredths and a 2 in the tenths column for 248 thousandths. So, since 3/10 is greater than 2/10, 34/10 is greater than 248 thousandths. Now, we could use that same decimal place value chart and we could compare here, or you could even just write it below. So 248 thousandths, and then I'm comparing it to 24 tenths. And remember we said we could add in a 0 here to fill in the spot there. Now, as I look, I see that the 2's in the tenths place are the exact same. So that doesn't really give me the information I need. So I go to the hundredths place. They're both 4 in the hundredths place. So then I need to go to the thousands place, and I can see that 8 is greater than 0. So 248 thousandths is greater than 240 thousandths. So what other representations could we use to check that 248,000 is greater than 24 hundredths? We could use our thousands chart grid. We could use a chart. We could use expanded form. You could, again, do as I just did, compare the digits to see. Now, let's compare 1 2/10 and 25 hundredths. So you could use a chart, but you see here you're going to have one whole chart and then 2/10 of another one. That's a lot of coloring and shading. So I would think about it a little bit different. I would just write the 1 2/10 and then do the 25 hundredths below. Now, some of you may say, oh, well, this looks like 12 and this looks like 25. Well, 25 is greater. But we want to actually look at the ones place value because it's the first value that comes up. Which is greater, 1 whole or 0? In this case, 1 and 2 tenths, right, is greater than 25 hundredths because 1 is a whole number and it's greater than 0. So some possible strategies, you could use a place value chart. The first difference is in the ones column. 1 is greater than the 0 one, so 1 and 2 tenths is greater than 25 hundredths. You could use expanded form. It's clear that 1 times 1 is greater than 0 times 1, so 1 and 2 tenths is greater. Using the thousandths grid, it would take a whole grid and 2 columns to show 1 and 2 tenths and less than 1 grid to show 25 hundredths. There is more shaded for 1 and 2 tenths, so 1 and 2 tenths is greater. Okay, so if we want to put these in order, let's see, which one would be the greatest? So which one has the greatest value? So as I look at these, I'm going to circle all the digits to the left of the decimal since they all have one. And I can automatically see that there's only one that has a value of 1 or more, 1 and 2 tenths. So I can look at that and I can tell that 1 and 2 tenths has to be the greatest one because all the other ones have a 0 in the ones place, and 1 and 2 tenths has a 1, which is greater than all of those. It's possible to compare multiple numbers at once by putting them in order in which they are found on a number line from least to greatest. So I can also take those and do that. The next thing, if I wanted to find what the next greatest one is, I could look in the tenths place, and I see a lot of 2's. But then I see this guy here is the only one with a 3 in the tenths place, so he would be the next greatest one. Now, you can use your student reference book. You won't have this master's page. For the rest of the lesson, you're actually going to play decimal top it, so I'm going to show you what that will look like. Play one sample round here for you. So you'll practice.
It's time for number
Comparing
time.
decimals.
Get ready. Player 1, it's your turn. Click the crab to get a gem.
So you click the crab.
Drag the gem to a place on the place value mat to make the largest number you can.
Now, as I look
Think
at
about which place would be best to help you make the largest number.
So as I look at 2, it's a pretty low number. I think I'm going to put that in the thousands
Now
place
it's the
because I want to get the
computer's
highest
turn.
number possible in the tenths. Okay, so I have an 8. I think 8's pretty high because the highest I can go is 9. So I'm going to put that in my tenths place. So I get a 0, so I automatically have to put it in the hundreds. So I have 802,000.
Now click on the arrow pointing to the larger 3-digit decimal.
And then as I look, I see my number is 802,000. But when I compare it here to the computer, we both have an 8 in the tenths place, and then they have a 9 in the hundreds, and I have a 0. So they win, so I would click on the higher one.
Great! You got it.
And that is how you play Top It in comparing decimals.